I should mention myself. How did I fit into all of this? Well, after Napoleon reasserted the ability of the nobles to be nobles, I became an enthusiastic supporter. I enlisted in the army. I rose rapidly in the ranks. I was a colonel in the Napoleonic army. I gloried in battle, in killing the enemy, in conquering his lands. Ha! What a life. The best life one could picture. Well, in 1812, Napoleon was determined to show the Tsar of all the Russias, as he was termed, that he was the greatest. And so he marched into Russia. And we won battle after battle. I should mention the army. What an army. The greatest army ever assembled. 600,000 men. It was called the Grand Army. It was not only Frenchmen. Poles joined our army. People from all over Europe. We were going to crush the medieval Russians. And we won battle after battle. And by fall of 1812, we were in their capital. Now Napoleon expected the Tsar to come to Moscow to sue for peace, a peace in which he would recognize Napoleon as the chief cheese. But this did not happen. Instead, someone lit a match and burnt the city down. Now, mind you, our lines of supply had been stretched way, way too far. And the winter came early that year. You could freeze your nose in the fall. It was that cold. We needed shelter. And with Moscow destroyed, we had only one recourse: retreat. Now, the Russian nation reacted angrily to the French invaders who had come to holy Russian soil. You know, it's very holy. Russian soil, without question.
Why is that?
Well, the Russian Tsars, for example, in the 14th century, made an edict that any Jew who sets forth on holy Russian soil would be executed on day of arrival. So this is really holy. You know, the Jews, when they lived in Russia, lived in what was called the Pale of Russia, not the central parts, yes, like Moscow, St. Petersburg. This was holy soil, not to be tarnished by having Jews. In any case, here we are, we're retreating, and the Russian people and the Russian army are all ganging up on us as we retreat, and we can't get out of Russia fast enough. And those who are not killed by starvation, by frost, by disease, the Russians were jabbing at us. And I was wounded just outside of Smolensk during one of my skirmishes.
What happened to you? How were you wounded?
Well, a bullet got the wrong way and got me. So there I was, lying on the field. The Grand Army wasn't taking me back or any of the other wounded back. All they wanted to do was get the heck out of the place. So we were left there. And as I lie there, half conscious, I could see the peasants coming onto the field with daggers, stabbing the wounded, then stripping the bodies of clothing, of weapons, of any other possessions. I wanted to get away from these vultures, so I crawled into a patch of woods hoping I would escape. And then I slumped into unconsciousness. The next thing I knew, I was lying on a bed. And there was this bearded gentleman soothing my forehead. He spoke to me in Russian. I didn't understand what he was saying, but he seemed to be speaking softly. I looked up at him, and I noticed he had a skull cap on his head and long side curls. It reminded me of a merchant I had seen in France. So I said to him, Juif, which meant Jew in French. Eventually, we were able to communicate. You see, I was a scholar. I had learned German. And it was close enough to the Yiddish that he and his family spoke for us to communicate. I learned that his name was Yehudi. He was a dairy farmer. And he had one son, Joseph, who helped him at the dairy farm during the day. He had a wife, and he had 3 children. The eldest of the daughters was named Malka. Malka stood for Malka Devora, Malka being queen. And she soon became the angel queen of my heart. You see, she was the one who found me lying there in the snow and persuaded her family to take me back to their house. The other daughters were Rivka and Fruma, who were the younger daughters. Now, never was Malka or any of her sisters alone with me. The father explained to me that it would be a desecration of Jewish virtue for a single girl to be in the same room alone with someone of the opposite sex. And Yehudi explained it to me, and so I understood that there would always be a minimum of two, if it were females in the room there. And they tended to me during the day.
This was dangerous for them, wasn't it?
Oh, was it dangerous. As a matter of fact, it was interesting. A visitor came, a neighbor stopped in. And Malki and Razel were in the room at the time. Malki had a bowl of red berries in her hand. She quickly squeezed her fingers against the berry, getting berry juice on her, and then sprinkled it on her forehead, then hopped on the bed in front of me so as to conceal me and pulled a blanket over herself so only her berry-marked face was exposed. I was later told by the family that the mother had told the neighbor, "Oh, God, she's got the scarlet fever. Nobody in the neighborhood should come to this house, they'll die." This was to keep me from being found out. And the father explained to me that a Jew in Russia was not exactly a wonderful situation to be in. The Russian peasants really didn't care for the Jews. That's a polite underestimate. They didn't need any excuse to persecute a Jew. But they hated the French. And for a Jew to harbor a Frenchman, they would have been all slaughtered on the spot. So this was of grave danger to the family, and my existence had to be kept away from anyone in the neighborhood, lest some gossip spill the beans. In any case, there they were nursing me back to health, and I eventually was able to communicate with the daughters. I was teaching them French through my knowledge of German, and they in turn were teaching me Russian. Well, one day I said to Yehudi, you know, I've grown very fond of Malki, the eldest daughter. He stopped me on the spot. Listen, you're a Frenchman, you're a good person, you're a Catholic, you'll go back to France when the war is over, when it's quiet. My daughter, she's 16, she's soon going to be of marriage age, she'll marry someone of our faith, and let's not have any further discussion of the subject. It saddened me. So one day I said to Malki, if I were a Jew, could I stay here with you and your family? Apparently Malki mentioned it on some occasion to her father. And so Yehudi, when he was alone with me, said, listen, you must understand some things. We don't take changing religions, conversions, lightly. God knows we've been already, as a people, forcibly threatened with death and God knows what if we didn't convert to another religion. We believe that a conversion should only take place when an individual of his own or her own free will wants to change his or her faith. That in order to be accepted as a Jew, a convert would first have to study the tenets of the faith. And after careful study of the tenets of the faith, should have time to reconsider whether he or she wants to do that. And then, and only then, if they're still interested, we would undergo conversion. But there are two other things you ought to keep in mind. And the life of a Jew in Russia. You know, our definition of a good Tsar is the one who had you beaten. The bad Tsar is the one who had you killed. The Russians don't need too many excuses to do us harm. And periodically we have pogroms, and they come through the Jewish neighborhoods and rape the women and murder the men. Is this the life you really want? You tell me you come of a noble family. You rule whole areas. You have servants. This is not the life you're going to have in Russia. The other thing you ought to consider is your family. How would they react to your being a Jew? Would they accept you as such? Nevertheless, if you really want to, I will teach you of the tenets of our faith to the best of my knowledge. And when it's a little safer, I'll have the rabbi come here and teach you further. Then you should have time to reconsider. And if you then want to convert, then we'll go through the process of conversion. In any case, I told him, Yes, your ways are quite different from mine, but you told me at one time, when I asked you why you had taken me in, you said that in the Talmud you are taught that to save one life is to save the world.